The morning started like most did, with the low hiss of the coffee maker and the hum of NPR murmuring from the kitchen radio. I sat by the window in my robe, watching the neighbor's dog pee on our mailbox again. Marla chuckled behind me. "Still thinking about installing that electric fence?" she asked, sliding a mug toward me. "Not unless we want to start a war with the Hendersons." She laughed and ruffled my hair like I was some overgrown kid. It bugged me, but I let it go. That was our rhythm now: soft jokes, careful silences. Comfort in routine. Sometimes too much comfort. My name's Simon Grant. I'm 62. Marla, my wife of nearly 4 decades, is 60. We live in a modest craftsman-style house in Santa Rosa, California. The kids, Max and Elise, are grown and out, living their lives in Portland and Los Angeles respectively. They call, they visit when guilt gets to them, and we pretend none of us are counting. Marla and I met in college at a lecture on postmodern art. I was bored stiff. She was taking notes like it was the answer to everything. She wore these ridiculous red glasses that made her look like a cartoon librarian. I loved her from the moment she looked at me sideways and whispered, "This is torture, right?" We got married 6 months after graduation. Had Max a year later. At least 2 years after that. Life got busy fast. I climbed the ranks as an aerospace engineer while Marla stayed home, then eventually worked part-time as a museum guide. Now she's back full-time, curating exhibits at the Sonoma Historical Society. She says it keeps her brain from turning into soft cheese. I retired early last year, thinking we'd travel. Do the things we talked about when the kids were little: see Alaska, visit Prague, maybe rent a house in Maine for the summer. But somehow, none of it happened. We stayed. The house stayed. Everything stayed. That's the thing they don't tell you about retirement. It can feel like you just stopped moving but forgot why. Our days fell into a rhythm. I fixed leaky faucets. She rearranged the linen closet. We went to the farmer's market every Saturday, held hands out of habit, and argued about which sourdough was least pretentious. At night, she read mystery novels in bed. I played Sudoku until my eyes burned. We kissed goodnight. But she hadn't reached for me in months, not really. And I didn't press. That, too, had become part of the rhythm. A low hum of something missing. Not enough to wreck things. Just enough to notice. We were still us, still teasing each other, still finishing each other's stories at dinner with friends. But sometimes I wondered if she missed the spark like I did, or if she just got better at pretending it didn't matter. I thought we were stable. Boring, maybe, but solid. It turns out, even stability has a fault line. You just don't see it until someone else starts tapping on the cracks. They moved in one Saturday morning in May, Dennis and Irene. Rolled up in a rented U-Haul with neon green lettering and a bumper sticker that read, "Yes, I am smarter than your honor student." That should have been my first clue. Marla and I watched from the porch, her with her tea, me pretending to prune the roses. Dennis hopped out of the truck in cargo shorts and a t-shirt that said "Dad joke loading." "Please wait." He waved like we were old friends. "Hey there, neighbors," he shouted across the yard. "Hope you like free entertainment." Marla laughed. I didn't. That afternoon, he came over with a 6-pack of local IPA and a grin that made me suspicious right away. Said his name was Dennis Halpern, worked in tech, and had 1 foot into early retirement. Irene, his wife, trailed behind like a shadow, quiet, polite, carrying a tray of store-bought cookies she claimed were homemade. Dennis did all the talking. All of it. He was the kind of guy who loved the sound of his own voice. Before I knew it, he was telling us about his fantasy football league, his old college band, and the time he accidentally crashed a bachelor party in Vegas and got kicked out wearing nothing but a sombrero. Marla was in stitches. "He's hilarious," she said later that night, spooning lasagna onto her plate. "Like a big kid." "Big's right," I muttered. I tried to laugh it off. I really did. But something about him grated on me. Maybe it was how easily he took over a room. Maybe it was the way Marla's eyes lit up when he started talking. Or maybe it was how Irene never said more than 5 words unless it was to apologize for him. A few weeks went by. We settled into a fragile kind of neighborly rhythm. Dennis would wave every time we saw him. Sometimes he'd shout dumb jokes across the fence, something about squirrels stealing his underwear or raccoons being government spies. Marla loved it. "You're just grumpy because he gets more laughs than you," she teased. I forced a smile. But the truth was, yeah, I felt replaced. Replaced and outpaced. Then came the garden party. It was a community event at the park, folding tables, paper lanterns, those little name tags that always peel off halfway through the afternoon. Marla and I went because we always did. Half the neighborhood showed up, and Dennis, of course, was in charge of games. When it was time for his famous trivia round, he pulled out a mic, an actual wireless mic, and strutted up like he was hosting Family Feud. "All right, folks," he said, "we've got a very special challenge for Simon, our resident rocket scientist." Everyone turned toward me. I froze mid-bite of a deviled egg. Dennis pointed to a giant flip chart. "Simon, name 5 constellations or strip off your socks and show us your best moonwalk." Laughter exploded. Marla doubled over, nearly dropping her lemonade. I stood up, trying to smile. "Seriously?" Dennis winked. "Come on, sport. Don't make me get the hula hoop." So I did it. I moonwalked in front of 70 people while someone filmed it on their phone. I played along, laughed, but inside, I was boiling. That night, as we cleaned up at home, I said, "He's going too far." That wasn't funny. It was humiliating. Marla shrugged, still smiling. "It was just a joke, Simon. Lighten up." I stared at her. "You laughed when he mocked me." "He didn't mock you," she said, waving me off. "He included you." She kissed my cheek and walked away, still giggling. But the way Dennis looked at me during that stupid moonwalk, like I was a punchline he'd already delivered, I couldn't shake it. And Marla laughing along with everyone else? That's when the crack between us stopped being invisible. Dennis caught me in the driveway on a Wednesday afternoon. I was halfway through washing the car when he called out from his garage. "Hey, Simon, got a minute?" I hesitated. He was holding something long and narrow wrapped in a towel, like it might explode. "What is it?" "Telescope mount," he said, grinning. "Vintage Celestrin. Snagged it from an estate sale. Thing's a little rusted. Thought maybe you could help me fiddle with the gears. I know you like that space stuff." It was the first time he'd approached me without a joke loaded in the chamber. Just 2 guys and a telescope, something I actually had an interest in. I told myself it was harmless. His basement was bigger than I expected. Clean. Organized. Smelled faintly of turpentine and cedar. The walls were lined with pegboards and tool chests. A half-finished model train set ran along one side, and there, in the middle of the room, was the telescope mount on a workbench. I walked over, running my hand along the base. "This is from the 70s. You weren't kidding. It's in decent shape." Dennis leaned against a nearby pillar. "Thought you'd appreciate it. You mind giving me a hand with the adjustment plate? It's kind of jammed. Might take 2 people." I didn't think twice. I stepped around the bench and grabbed the aluminum arm. Dennis moved behind me, reaching into a drawer. Then I heard the click. Metal on metal. Cold against my wrist. I looked down. A handcuff. Just one. The other was looped around a steel support beam. "What the hell?" Dennis stepped back, holding the key just out of reach. "Relax," he said, laughing. "It's just a gag." I yanked at the cuff. It was tight. "This isn't funny. Take it off." He didn't move. Just leaned back, smirking. Footsteps creaked overhead. Then the unmistakable sound of Marla's voice. "Oh my God, you actually did it?" I froze. "Marla." She peered down the basement stairs, eyes wide, lips curled into a smile that didn't look like hers. "Simon, don't freak out. It's just a joke." "What kind of joke is this?" I snapped. "Unlock me. Now?" Dennis gave an exaggerated sigh. "You're always so serious. Thought you engineers liked puzzles." Marla descended slowly, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve. "We'll be right back," she said softly. "Just going to admire the star maps." "What star maps?" I asked. But they were already heading upstairs. Dennis tossed the key up once, caught it, and winked before disappearing behind the door. The door closed, then locked. I was stunned, motionless. The cool concrete pressed against my back as I sank down to the floor, still tethered to the pillar like a prisoner. I listened. At first, it was quiet. Just the creaks of floorboards and soft murmurs. Then the murmurs turned into laughter. Then moaning. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? 20? Long enough to feel the raw bite of the cuff grind into my wrist. Long enough to realize what I was hearing wasn't some elaborate prank. It was deliberate. At one point, I shouted up the stairs. "Marla, what the hell is going on?" No answer. I heard what I heard. The rise and fall of voices, bed springs, giggling. Marla's voice, breathless, playful. Nothing innocent about it. By the time the basement door creaked open again, I was soaked in sweat and shaking. Dennis strolled down with a beer in one hand and the key in the other. He unlocked me casually, like he was taking off a watch. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just stared at him. Marla stood behind him, arms crossed, cheeks flushed. Her smile was gone. I told him it was too far, she said quietly. I didn't know he'd actually lock you in. Dennis just laughed. Lighten up, man. It's not like we committed a crime. I said nothing. Just walked past them, up the stairs, out the door, and back to my house with my left wrist aching and something cold blooming in my chest. That was the moment I knew something had shifted for good. Whatever trust we'd built over 4 decades had snapped clean in two. And Marla, whether she realized it or not, had helped through the cutting. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat on the edge of the bed, wrist wrapped in a dish towel soaked with rubbing alcohol, staring at the door Marla didn't bother walking through. She stayed next door. Whether with Dennis or on the couch, I didn't care. That line had been crossed. When she finally came back the next morning, she had the gall to act like it was salvageable. It got out of hand, she said, standing in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she should come in or run. Dennis took it too far. I didn't look up. You were laughing. Her voice cracked. I didn't know he was going to lock you in. I thought it was a joke. I snapped, standing. My voice echoed more than I meant it to. Is that what that was? You let him handcuff me in a basement like some prop. Then you climbed upstairs and I couldn't even finish the sentence. And you laughed. Her face crumbled, but I didn't care. I needed her to see it, see me. Take your stuff, I said. Go stay with your sister. Simon. I said go. She left without arguing, which told me everything. No real denial. No rage. Just quiet shame. Or guilt. Or maybe fear. I couldn't tell anymore. A day later, Elise showed up. She banged on the door like she was ready for a fight. What the hell happened? She demanded as soon as I opened it. Mom is at Aunt Lauren's crying her eyes out. Then she can stay there, I said flatly. Elise followed me inside, ignoring my silence. She said it was a prank, that it got out of control. I turned, lifting my shirt sleeve to show her the bruising along my wrist. Dark, angry, raw. She stared. I sat in a basement, I said slowly, while your mother and a married neighbor made bedroom noises directly above me. I was handcuffed to a steel pipe, Elise. I couldn't move. Couldn't even cover my ears. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then she sat down hard on the couch. I didn't know it was like that. I nodded. No one did. That's the point. She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, do you think she actually, you know? I don't care what she calls it. I care that she knew I was down there. I called her name. Elise's hand shook as she rubbed her knees. Dad, this is beyond messed up. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Later that evening, Marla called. First time since leaving. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was short. Simon, I'll do whatever you need. Just tell me what it'll take to make this right. So I texted her one thing. Polygraph. Your idea. I choose the questions. Dennis too. Or don't bother calling again. The reply came minutes later. Okay. And just like that, it shifted. Not forgiveness. Not even negotiation. Just structure. Control. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some kind of footing. That night, I boxed up the photo albums. I didn't throw them away. I wasn't ready for that. But I didn't want them in my line of sight either. Not while the sound of Marla's laughter still echoed in my skull. Max called the next day, having heard about the fight from Elise. He didn't take a side. He just listened. Then he said, whatever you decide, we're behind you. Just say the word. That meant more than I could admit. I was no longer a husband, not really. I was something in between. A man with a wounded wrist and an empty house, drawing a line so sharp and bright that no one could step over it by mistake again. This wasn't a pause. This was separation. And if there was going to be a bridge back, she'd have to build it plank by plank, with the truth nailed into everyone. The guy who ran the polygraph lab looked like someone who'd coached JV wrestling for 30 years before getting bored and learning lie detection on the side. His name was Stan, and his office smelled like dust and stale coffee. I didn't care. I wasn't there for comfort. You're sure you want to control the questions? He asked, flipping open a line notepad. Most spouses prefer a general honesty screening. I'm not most spouses, I said. And this isn't a general situation. He nodded, scribbling something. All right then. I'll need to review your list before the session. Nothing too abstract. These machines don't handle poetry. I pulled out my folded sheet. I'd written it the night before, one question at a time, pausing after each like I was loading bullets. On the day in question, did you and Dennis have any physical contact of a sexual nature while Simon was locked in the basement? Did you believe Simon could hear what was happening above him? Did you find the experience entertaining? Have you had any other physical contact with Dennis before that day? Did you lie to Simon about any part of your involvement? I handed it to Stan. He scanned it silently, then gave me a low whistle. You wanted answered yes or no? Yes, I said. That's the point. Fair enough. Just letting you know, it's hard to hear yes when you're hoping for no. I said nothing. He scheduled both sessions for Friday, Marla in the morning, Dennis in the afternoon. Apparently, they'd already reached out and confirmed their participation, letting him know I'd be the one setting the terms. That threw me for a second. Marla, I could understand. Guilt does strange things. But Dennis? Why would he agree to a lie detector test knowing I was the one loading the chamber? Later that day, I got my answer. I was in the backyard when I saw Irene next door, dragging garbage bins down the driveway. I hadn't spoken to her since the garden party. We usually exchanged polite nods. This time, she came over. Simon, she said, voice low, as darting toward her front door. You should know something. I put the hose down. What is it? She hesitated, then stepped closer. Dennis has been reading about polygraphs. There's a whole forum, Reddit, dark web, I don't know, where people trade tips on how to pass. Pain cues, breathing patterns, mental distractions. I felt the back of my neck tighten. Why are you telling me this? Because I think he's planning to beat it, she said. He's cocky. Thinks he can control everything. Even the truth. She nodded. That night I sat at the kitchen table, rereading the questions, wondering if the test even mattered now. If a man like Dennis could game the machine, and a woman like Marla still claimed it was all just a mistake, then what did that leave me? But I knew the answer. The test wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to myself. That I hadn't imagined it. That I wasn't crazy. That the lines between cruelty and comedy weren't as blurry as they wanted me to believe. It was Irene who called me first. Her voice shook over the line. You need to come over. Now. I found her in the living room, holding her phone like it had just hissed at her. On the screen was a paused video, time-stamped and clean-looking. Framed just right. Dennis stood near the telescope, his arm around Marla's waist. They smiled, joked, talked about constellations. Irene hit play. The clip continued. They laughed, flirted, then walked out of frame. There were no moans, no bed creaking, nothing to suggest anything happened at all. He edited this, I said. I know. She paused it. It's like he's trying to rewrite it, to make it look innocent. I took the phone, scrubbed backward and forward through the video. Everything looked so staged. Too perfect. Even the lighting felt fake. Bright. Early afternoon. He said it was recorded during your incident, she said. To prove there was no funny business. I pointed at the timestamp. This says 3:18 p.m. Exactly. Marla had locked me in the basement just after 6 p.m. I remembered the clock above Dennis's workbench. I remembered it ticking while I sat on the concrete floor, handcuffed to a steel pole. So why was this footage set 3 hours earlier? I didn't need to ask. I already knew the answer. They were setting up an alibi. 10 minutes later, Dennis and Marla walked in, like this was all normal, like we were just neighbors gathering for a casual Wednesday night chat. Marla's hair was curled, and she wore lipstick. Dennis had on one of his awful pun t-shirts. This one said, lie detector? I prefer lie director. Irene stood stiff beside me, arms crossed. Show him the video, she said coldly. Dennis glanced at me, then back at her. Already did. I didn't say anything. Just stared at him until his fake smile cracked. Marla stepped forward. Simon, I know things have been tense, but this video proves it was harmless. Does it? I asked, because I noticed something funny. They both looked at me. Sunlight, I said. The way it hits the telescope? That's afternoon light. And yet, when I was locked in your basement, it was almost dark. Marla opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dennis chuckled weakly. Lighting isn't always reliable. You know cameras, sensors adjust. I turned to Irene. Can you play the last 10 seconds again? She hit play. The video ended with Dennis exiting the frame. As he left, he limped slightly. Subtle, but clear. I narrowed my eyes. What happened to your leg, Dennis? He blinked. What? Your limp. You weren't limping last week. What changed? Nothing, old soccer injury. Flares up sometimes. I stepped forward. Let me see your ankle. He laughed, but it was too loud. You want to check my ankle? I didn't wait. I stepped on his foot. Hard. He held. Christ, what the hell? He barked, stumbling backward, clutching his shoe. Marla rushed to him. Simon, what is wrong with you? But I wasn't looking at her. I was looking at the thing that fell out of his sock. A black plastic disc the size of a quarter. I picked it up. Pain cue, I said. Your emergency override. Press it when you're about to lie, flood your body with discomfort. It messes with the readings. Classic cheat technique. Marla's eyes darted from me to Dennis, who now looked very interested in the floor. I held the disc up. You were planning to beat the test. Lie through it. Cover your tracks with doctored footage and a limp. Dennis tried to grab it. I pulled away. You can't lie your way out of this, I said. He didn't answer. Just turned and walked out the door. Marla stood frozen. Eyes wide. Lip trembling. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about that. I turned to Irene. Can you send me that video? She nodded. Then I looked back at Marla. If that's the version you were planning to show me, I said quietly, then I guess I know what kind of truth you're still protecting. He came back that night. Not through the front door. He just stood there in the dark on my porch, like some cowardly teenager waiting for his punishment. Dennis. He held a flash drive between two fingers like it was evidence in a murder trial, which, in a way, it was. I'm done, he said. Take it. Do what you want. I didn't ask why. I didn't thank him. I just took the drive and closed the door in his face. By morning, I had Marla's sister Lauren and Irene in my living room. Marla came too, clutching her purse like it had answers inside. I haven't seen what's on it, she said as I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. I swear. I didn't reply. The file was labeled plainly, April_event_mp4. It opened with a timestamp in the corner 6:17 p.m. The same night I'd been cuffed in Dennis's basement. The same time Marla said they'd been looking at maps. There was no map. The footage was taken from a mounted corner camera, pointed at Dennis's living room. No one looked at it directly, which told me it wasn't staged. The first few seconds were uneventful, just Marla and Dennis standing near the telescope, talking in low voices. She laughed. He touched her back. And then it shifted. He moved in closer. She didn't move away. He whispered something in her ear, and she smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not the forced dinner party grin. Not the polite wife smile. Something else. Something younger. Almost gleeful. Then his hand slipped lower, and she kissed him. Not by accident. Not under pressure. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Lauren gasped. I paused the video, my finger hovering over the trackpad. You don't have to see the rest, I said flatly. I do, Irene said. Marla sat completely still. I hit play again. They collapsed onto the couch. The telescope rolled away, forgotten. Clothes shifted. The audio picked up quiet sounds, her laughing, Dennis grunting something about how he'll be fine. Then the moment that gutted me, Marla turned toward the ceiling, toward the floorboards above the basement, and said, Think he can hear us? Dennis replied, Maybe. That's part of the fun. And then she laughed. Loud. Clear. Delighted. The room went completely still. I closed the laptop. Lauren's face had gone pale. She turned slowly toward her sister. You knew. I didn't, Marla started, voice trembling. I didn't know he'd actually used the footage. That's not what I meant, Lauren snapped. You knew he was down there. You looked up. Irene stood, disgust written across every line of her face. You didn't just cheat, she said to Marla. You humiliated him. On purpose. Marla opened her mouth again, but nothing came out. I sat back, hands folded, breathing slowly. This wasn't a prank, I said. It was an exhibition. Simon, Marla whispered, barely audible. It got away from me. I never meant. You laughed. Her eyes filled. Lauren looked from her sister to me. Do you want me to take the drive? She asked quietly. For Elise and Max? I nodded. Don't show them yet. But let them know it exists. She took the flash drive like it weighed 100 pounds. Marla sat hunched on the couch, face in her hands, breathing uneven. You saw everything, she said through her fingers. You saw the worst version of me. No, I said. I saw the truest one. I stood, motioned toward the door. Lauren took Marla's elbow, guiding her up. I didn't say another word. Didn't need to. The footage had said it all, and I finally, undeniably, believed it. She tried everything. The next morning, I found an envelope under my door with her handwriting on it, soft, cursive, controlled. Inside was a letter 3 pages long. No excuses, no denials, just memory after memory, stacked like apologies. I still remember how you looked at me on our wedding day, she wrote. I still remember our first fight and how you refused to leave the room until we both said sorry. You were always kinder than me, stronger than me. I folded the letter back up and slid it into the kitchen drawer. I didn't throw it out. I didn't reread it either. Instead, I changed the locks. I emailed the divorce attorney the next day, told them I wanted clean lines, no drawn-out debates, no games. We had no shared debts. The kids were grown. Everything we owned was already split down the middle in spirit. When Marla called, I let it ring. When she texted, I didn't respond. She sent another letter, then another, each one more desperate, her words cracking at the edges. I don't know who I am without us, she wrote once. But I did. She was someone who could look a man in the eyes for 39 years and still laugh above him when he was chained to the cold. I gave the flash drive to Lauren, tucked in a padded envelope with a single note. Use it however you see fit, but tell them the truth. She did. Max called 2 days later. I answered on the second ring. I saw it, he said, his voice low, steady. I didn't want to, but I had to. He didn't ask me to forgive her. He didn't beg me to reconsider. He just said, you didn't deserve that. None of it. Elise called later that night, sobbing before she even said hello. I feel like I don't even know who she is, she whispered. You know who you are, I said. That's enough for now. They both said they'd support whatever I needed. I didn't ask for anything. Just knowing they understood was more than I expected. By the end of the week, I boxed up Marla's remaining things. Photos. Scarves. That mug she always insisted made coffee taste better. I didn't break a single one. I just taped the lid shut and left it on the porch. Lauren picked it up the next morning. She didn't come inside. I spent my evenings in silence. No radio. No TV. Just the creak of the house as it settled into a new version of quiet. I found I didn't miss the sound of footsteps from the other room. Didn't miss the smell of her shampoo in the hallway. I missed the idea of her. But that wasn't real anymore. What was real was a man rebuilding himself after watching his wife stand over his pain and laugh. So I let her beg in her letters. Let her cry in voicemails. But I never answered again. Not once. Because she had already answered the only question that mattered, and the truth was louder than any apology. I started walking at night. Just small loops around the block at first. The house was too quiet, and the silence used to bother me, but eventually it started to feel honest. Clean. Sometimes I'd end up on Irene's porch. She'd be there with a glass of wine, always with a second chair pulled out. We didn't talk about what happened much. We didn't need to. A quiet look, a shared pause, and the weight between us lightened just enough. I wasn't looking for companionship. But it found me anyway, in the gentle rhythm of two people who didn't ask for each other, but didn't push away either. One night, we sat there until almost midnight, trading stories about books we never finished and dreams we never followed through on. When I got up to leave, she put a hand on my arm. I'm sorry, she said. For what? For not speaking up sooner. For pretending I didn't see it. I nodded. You did what you could. She looked away. I should have done more. But by then, it didn't matter. A week later, Dennis tried to show his face again. Pulled up in his stupid gray Jeep, parked like he owned the curb. I saw him step out with that same smug face he always wore, like the last few weeks hadn't happened. I was trimming the hedges when he strolled up the path. Thought maybe we could talk. No, I said, standing up. He gave that performative half-laugh. Come on, man. It's been long enough. I figured we're both adults here. I stepped forward and punched him square in the face. Not hard enough to knock him out. Just hard enough to split his lip and make him remember that not everything in life resets with a new punchline. He stumbled back, fell against the garden bed. Jesus, Simon. I looked down at him. Now we're even. He scrambled to his feet, sputtering something about suing, about calling the police. Irene has the footage, I said. The real footage. You try anything, and she files it. His face paled. That was the last time I saw him. 2 days later, Irene said his house was listed on Zillow. 3 weeks after that, the car was gone. Good riddance. When the divorce papers came, I signed them without flinching. Clean break. No fanfare. No final words. I started cooking for myself again, real meals, not just toast and eggs. I planted basil in a clay pot on the windowsill. Started fixing up my old road bike. Little things. Personal things. Things that didn't have her name on them. And sometimes, when Irene and I sat outside, she'd rest her hand near mine. Not touching. Just close enough to remind me that not every silence meant loss. Women started to notice me again. Neighbors. A friend of Lauren's. One even asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I thanked her and declined. Not because I was bitter. Because I was finally free. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished. And finishing was the most peaceful thing I'd done in years.